Hi, and welcome back to the British Accent Podcast. I'm Emily.
And I'm Nick. Today we're exploring something that's often felt, but not always talked about: how speaking more than one language can actually shape the way you think.
Yes, and not just in terms of vocabulary or grammar, but in how you process ideas, how you make decisions, how you relate to emotions, even how you view time and relationships.
It's fascinating. When someone speaks more than one language, they don't just switch between words, they often switch between perspectives. Each language carries with it a worldview. It's like walking into a different mental space every time you switch tongues.
And that shift changes things. It changes how you describe your feelings. It changes how you talk about responsibility, or politeness, or even memory. Because the structure of the language influences the structure of your thoughts.
Take something as simple as time. In English, we often talk about the future as being ahead of us and the past as being behind. But in some other languages, the past is described as in front, because it's visible, and the future is behind, because it's unknown.
That small difference can actually shift how you think about life, about planning, about reflection. And when you speak both types of languages, your brain gets used to moving between those views. You begin to feel the world differently, depending on the words you use to describe it.
It's almost like having two or more lenses to look through, and the more languages you speak, the more mental lenses you carry. And that flexibility, that ability to see the same situation from multiple angles, that's powerful.
Studies have shown that multilingual people often have stronger cognitive control. They can focus more easily, ignore distractions, and adapt to change more quickly. Their brains are used to switching tracks.
And that switching becomes second nature. You're not just translating words, you're deciding how to express yourself, depending on which language feels right in the moment. It's like choosing a different path through the same forest.
Exactly. Some people say they feel more emotional in one language, and more logical in another. Or more playful in one, more serious in another. And that's not imagination, that's the brain adjusting to the tone, rhythm, and history of each language.
And the words you use in each language have different emotional weight. A word in your native tongue might carry childhood memories. But in your second language, that same word might feel more neutral, or even empowering, like it's finally yours.
Yes. That emotional distance can give you clarity. Some people find it easier to talk about difficult topics in a second language, not because they don't care, but because it feels safer, slightly removed. Like they have more control.
And that's part of why multilingual thinking can feel so layered. You don't just know more words, you feel more ways of being. You're used to switching, adapting, rethinking, depending on the language and the context.
That kind of mental flexibility becomes part of who you are. You develop a comfort with nuance, with ambiguity. You learn that things can be said in more than one way, and that meaning isn't fixed. It depends on the words you choose.
And over time, that flexibility spills over into other areas of life. You start asking better questions. You become more patient with people who think differently. You understand that communication isn't just about accuracy, it's about intention and connection.
Which might explain why so many multilingual people are naturally empathetic. They've spent time inside multiple systems of expression. They've learned to listen deeply, to pause before responding, to consider how something might be understood, not just what is being said.
And that's not something you can measure with a test. It's something that builds slowly, over time. Through lived experience. Through switching between languages in real conversations, real emotions, real-life decisions.
And even the mistakes, they teach you something. Each time you misunderstand, each time you say something awkward, your brain learns to adjust, to stay alert. It builds not only language skills, but emotional intelligence, the ability to read the room, to notice subtleties, to adapt with grace.
That's something monolingual speakers might not experience in the same way. When you're always speaking in the same framework, you don't have to think about these layers: tone, rhythm, phrasing, cultural expectations. But multilingual speakers are constantly balancing them.
And that balancing act changes the brain. It strengthens your working memory. It improves your ability to focus, to hold multiple ideas at once. It gives you practice in being mentally agile, not just with words, but with people, with emotions, with change.
And I think what's really beautiful is that it stays with you. Even if you don't speak every language fluently, the mental pathways you've built remain. The openness, the curiosity, the willingness to think in different ways, it becomes part of your identity.
Yes, and that identity is dynamic. It shifts depending on which language you're in, which words you have access to, which version of you is speaking. And rather than being confusing, it can actually be liberating. You get to hold more than one version of truth.
That's what multilingual people learn to do, not just speak across languages, but think across them. To see that no one language holds the whole story. That ideas can stretch, meanings can change, and understanding can deepen when you have more than one lens to look through.
And with that deeper understanding comes a kind of humility. You realize how powerful language is, how it shapes our thoughts without us even noticing. And the moment you start comparing languages, you start noticing your own assumptions.
Like how some languages use gendered nouns, and others don't. Or how some cultures have dozens of words for a concept you only ever knew one word for. Suddenly, the world feels bigger, and your thinking becomes more flexible.
It's almost like being invited into someone else's inner world. Each language opens a door to how people in that culture organize experience, memory, time, even emotion. You're not just learning how to say something, you're learning why they say it that way.
And that gives you a kind of insight that goes beyond language. It teaches you patience. It teaches you to wait, to listen, to explore meaning before assuming you understand it. That's a very different kind of intelligence, one that's deeply relational.
And that kind of intelligence builds slowly. It doesn't come from memorizing lists or studying grammar rules alone. It comes from experience, from using the language, making mistakes, listening to how people express themselves, and letting that shape you.
And as your brain gets used to switching between languages, it also becomes better at holding contradiction. You become more comfortable with ideas that don't fully match. You learn that truth isn't always one fixed sentence, sometimes it depends on which language you're using.
And that's where the beauty lies, I think. In those quiet moments where you realize you don't have to choose just one way of thinking. You can hold multiple truths at once. You can exist in the space between languages and still feel completely yourself.
It's a kind of freedom, isn't it? When you speak more than one language, you're not locked into a single way of being. You have range. You can adjust, soften, sharpen. You can express things differently depending on how you want to show up in that moment.
And even the act of switching languages can change your energy. You might feel more formal in one, more playful in another. And that's not strange, it's natural. It's your brain responding to rhythm, to memory, to cultural context.
It's actually quite special when you think about it. Because every time you use another language, you're not just sharing your thoughts, you're inviting someone into a part of your world that's shaped by years of practice, emotion, memory.
And the more languages you learn, the more connected you feel. Not just to people from other places, but to parts of yourself you didn't even know were waiting to be spoken.
Yes. It's like you gain access to new parts of your mind, not because you become someone else, but because you discover how much more of you there is to uncover.
And that's something that doesn't show up on a test score or in a speaking exam. That sense of depth, of perspective, of expansion. It's something only multilingual people truly understand from the inside out.
And I think that's what makes multilingual thinking so valuable. It's not just clever, it's rich. It's textured. It's human. And it's a skill the world needs now more than ever.
So if you ever feel like your mind works differently when you switch between languages, that's because it does. And it's not a problem. It's a strength. A quiet, flexible kind of strength that grows with every conversation you have, in every language you carry.
You're not just learning to speak, you're learning to think in a new way. To stretch your imagination. To understand people more deeply. And to move through the world with more empathy and more awareness.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope this episode reminded you just how powerful multilingualism really is, not just for communication, but for connection, for growth, and for self-discovery.
We'll be back soon with another conversation from the heart of language learning. Until then, speak gently, think boldly, and keep your mind open. It's already doing amazing things.
Take care and keep going. You're learning more than just words.